This is Dr. David Proden, and I want to thank you as we begin another journey into school and community safety. If you're looking for industrial safety expert, Appalachian State University professor Dr. Timothy Ludwig, please visit www.safety-doc.com. Again, that's Dr. Timothy Ludwig at www.safety-doc.com.
Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Proden. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Proden on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. David Proden, and welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast. So, it is wood-burning time here in southern Wisconsin. Actually had high temperature, just barely getting to 30 degrees today. Inch of snow on the ground. Fireplace has been doing overtime. Kind of funny. I was out running the other night, and as I'm running, I can smell smoke. Someone has a fire going, and it smells good. You know, the smell of hickory and oak and maple just has kind of this soothing, warming, comforting aura about it. But I'm also thinking, probably not everybody's into this. Like, this person doesn't have their fire hot enough, because typically what happens is where I run, it's a little bit of a lower part of town. So if you don't have a really hot fire, the smoke isn't rising up higher into the air and being carried off. It's being kind of cooled and brought back down into the valley, kind of where I run. So I'm thinking, boy, somebody just doesn't have their fire going warm enough yet. I wonder who that is. Come to find out, it is me. I get closer and I'm like, oh, that's coming out of my chimney. Just don't have it hot enough yet. So it's being pushed down and kind of smothering the neighborhood. Not where you're walking through and you can see smoke or it's foggy or anything like that. So, but yeah, it is an advantage of living at the top of a hill, but down below, I'm sure sometimes my neighbors are like, Dave, get that fire going, hot. And it was just one of those times where it also has to do with the pressure differentials in the atmosphere. And I learned this when I was out in Hibbing, Minnesota, observing a mine blast at the Hibbing open air ore mine, which I think is the biggest in the United States. It provided a substantial amount of iron ore for manufacturing during World War II. So interesting to look this up. Hibbing Mine. Also the fact that they moved the entire town of Hibbing as they were mining, because they had to mine where the town was to get the iron ore. So they moved the town, I think, a mile or two away. And now actually they're approaching closer as they mine back to where this town was, or the current town is. So I did a video back in, I don't know, it was 2016, I think. And my dad and I did this trip up to Superior, and then we also went up to Hibbing. We're fortunate to be there on a day of a blast. And you're far enough away. I mean, a solid mile, but you can see everything. I mean, it's pretty spectacular. And it was a clear day. A fence, mesh steel fence, and they have little holes, like 4 to 6 in the fence where people can take their cameras and film. And there was a lady filming beside me, and her camera died. Battery went dead. And she's like, oh, just can't believe it. Like, battery's dead. Do you want this spot? I'm like, sure. So I had my camcorder and set up and got this shot of when this explosion happened, this detonation, and then everything, flies up and everything shakes, and still quite a ways away, but pretty spectacular. But before this explosion, an airplane, like kind of a crop dusting type airplane, flies a crisscross pattern over top of where they're going to do this explosion in the mine. And again, it's an open air mine, so they would just explode these areas to loosen them up, and then they would dig them out with, the machinery and load them into these massive dump trucks and take them off and stuff like that. So nothing's underground; it's all happening on surface level. But they're flying this back, and I have it recorded. And I remember asking somebody, I'm like, "Why are they doing that?" And this was somebody. It's interesting because people like that had worked at the mine for 30, 40 years, would come back on blast days to observe this. It's just such a big part of their life. And especially, if you're in Hibbing, Minnesota, there's not a lot going in Hibbing, Minnesota other than the mine. I think the Greyhound Museum is there also. But what happens, they fly the plane over, and if there is a difference in the temperature so far above, whether, I don't know, half mile above or something like that, the vibrations, the waves, the shock wave coming up, if it hits like this denser air, it can actually then just be turned around and sent back down to the ground. And if that happens, it can do damage to the machinery on the ground, damage to people. So basically the shock wave is just supposed to go up and dissipate into the atmosphere, which happens most of the time. But apparently at some time in the past, it didn't work that way. So that's why they do this crisscross and making sure that everything is fine as far as the upper levels of the atmosphere. It was pretty uneventful after that, but pretty amazing. The video is still out there, and I think it has like 1,000 views. And a few people like it, and one person actually put a thumbs down, which I'm wondering, like, why you would give a thumbs down to a video like that. It just didn't make any sense to me. Not that I take it personal, because it's really just, I set it up just to record this event, and I thought it was so unique, and the video turned out really well that I'd share it with other people that had interest in the mine. It's not like I'm sitting there narrating the whole thing, because I really don't know what's going on. You can hear people in the background kind of talking. But yeah, someone gives it a thumbs down. I'm like, well, I don't get that. So if you're clicking on Hibbing Mine video, like, I'm not sure how many Hibbing Mine videos are out there that this one, had somebody decided to give it a thumb down. But so something I was thinking about. So today I'm going to be talking about the Zen of Stacking Firewood. And actually there are websites, blogs that have been done on this topic I wasn't aware of when I decided to do this podcast, that other people had experienced the similar feeling of what I'm going to share with you today, and how this relates to personal well-being. So when we talk about safety on the Safety Doc podcast, physical safety, psychological safety, in our last podcast with Ilita Kenley, spiritual safety. So today we're going to go back into personal safety, personal well-being. And I'm going to point out, I recently completed transferring about 9 cords of firewood from my garage into my basement, which is something that happens pretty much every year because we heat part of the house with wood and a wood insert, so it's very high efficiency. Something special about wood and just the whole process of preparing the wood and the smell of the wood, deciding how you're going to stack a pile of wood. I'll get into that. So in one of my early administrative jobs, there was an in-town elementary school, and it since has been replaced. But that school every classroom had a massive fireplace, literally probably 6 to 8 feet wide, with this arching brick. So this was a building, 1905, 1908-ish built. And it was so spectacular to go room to room with the high ceilings. And then, of course, these fireplaces hadn't been used for decades, but they were still there. They had been blocked off, but they were still there. And it almost projected this sense of psychological warmth in this bygone era, and almost this primal comfort to walk through that building and to go into those classrooms, and also thankful that they didn't decide at some point to renovate these buildings and put drywall in front of that and just make it into a standard wall. That it was still there, like it still had the soot, stained bricks that, were there from the last time they had used it, maybe in the 1920s or 1930s, who knows? And just thinking like how removed we are today from a society that would even think or allow something like that to be in a school. Could you just imagine? This new school got done, this new elementary school, and every classroom has a large fireplace. Yeah, but something very special about that. So one of the things I love about stacking firewood, I got done with this about 2 weeks ago. Took my time this year, different than previous years. I'll get into that. But one of the things about stacking firewood is that it's task completion. It is task completion. You see the commotion of the wood being delivered, and this massive pile of wood develops inside the 2-car garage as it gets dumped off. And I actually get wood from a supplier. It's a guy, who's retired, and he and his kids supply in the Madison area some of the businesses that use wood for their fireplaces, for pizza, and then has a few other clients and me, but goes through a lot of wood. So it's a big wood production, even though there's a small number of people he interacts with. But like 9 cords is quite a bit of wood, and I could probably even go through more than that. But I'm careful with the damper and how much air is getting in and how fast or how slow things burn. But anyway, going back, we are no longer a task completion society. I've thought about this a lot lately. And what I mean by this is we have fewer things we engage in that are truly have a start point, have a tangible activity that you can see the results of, that you can interact with, that you can touch, and then there's a defined end to it. So we don't have that. I work in school safety, and it's so evident in school safety. It's this race without a finish line. There'll never be a completion to school safety. Whatever's put together as a safety fortification, someone goes about either circumventing that or a new way to attack a school. And what does reporting look like? And what does reporting look like when social media advances and now there's different apps and there's things that include GPS? I mean, so you get into this network where your job will never be complete because what you're working with is always evolving and changing. You can never account for all the variables. And as you change one thing, it'll change the variable that you're trying to impact. So it can, and it does produce burnout. I mean, it burns people out. There's studies, again, there's studies thing, but of the burnout if you're dealing with humans and scenarios like this versus if you're dealing with something that's very mechanical, that has a kind of a start point. You work on something and there's an end point. So, I was doing some nostalgia thinking. So I turned 47 on November 7th. And the number at face value looks old to me. Now, most people who I work with or know me were guessing I was 41 to 44. And no one was coming in at 47, and nobody came in above that. So I guess I feel good. And I mean, I feel physically very good for 47. Again, I'm thankful to not have knee and hip and back problems and stuff like that. But yeah, 47, so again, some face value but looking back, peeling back some of those years, remembering when I was involved in many closure activities in the old days. I remember painting fences. Come on, fence. We had a redwood fence that had faded over years. And I remember, the different buckets and getting them ready and shaking them up and just work your way across the fence. I mean, every day until you got it done. I think it took 3 days to get this fence done. It was a big fence. And seeing the progression. And of course, it's kind of frustrating at the start because you're like, I have all this left to do. And then halfway through, it's like, whoa, like when it all gets done, it's going to be really cool. Then it gets done and you stand back and look at it. It's like, wow. And it's done. So, mowing lawns right now, I wish I could kind of mow my lawn. It's under an inch of snow and I didn't get all the leaves up in time. So that's a little bit of a problem. I have to deal with, but mowing my lawn also has a Zen-like quality to it. Start, mow it, put a pattern into it, done, get the grass off of the driveway, and just I'll stand on the road, or I'll go and cross the road and stand by the curb by my neighbors and just look over and take in, like, it looks great, the start to finish. And the mowing, the moving, the walking, the picking up of the sticks actually before you start, and washing of the mower, putting the mower away. But all of these steps that have a defined start and a defined end.
Thank you for tuning in to the Safety Doc Podcast with the nation's leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Author, radio show host, university instructor, researcher, expert witness, and consultant. Powerful testimonials. Dr. Perrodin has a strong reputation as the go-to safety consultant, and he was still able to exceed our expectations. When we went looking for an expert in the field of crisis preparedness and prevention, David was the single person we pursued. Not easy stepping into the touchier subjects of life, but Dr. David pulls it off. Take a listen. Now, back to Dr. David Perrodin and the Safety Doc Podcast.
And then, replacing the spark plugs and wires on my car, in addition to other maintenance, pulling out the air filter and flushing the radiator, but I mean probably the typical changing out the plugs, not like today, where spark plugs either last the lifetime of the car, or these things are kind of lifetime, lifetime transmission fluid and lifetime whatever, but that's not the way it was. So I remember replacing spark plugs. So you'd get out the ratchet set, which had been handed down to me, and you had your certain fitting just for the spark plug, and cars were made so you could access these things because they actually expected that you would do maintenance on your own vehicle. So you didn't have, like today, everything kind of has a nice, tidy plastic cover over it when you lift your hood. So, I mean, put your windshield washer fluid in, but pretty much everything else is kind of hard to get at. But yeah, replacing the spark plugs, and I loved doing that on my old Plymouth Duster, which still had a carburetor, didn't even have fuel injection, on my LeBaron, on my dad's F-150 pickup truck. And just something of taking the plugs out, with the ratchet and hearing the noise of the ratchet, getting the plugs out. And then there used to be, it was about the size of a 50-cent piece. And it was tapered, and that's how you would get the gap on the spark plug. So you'd buy the spark plugs, and then you would set the gap to whatever it was, 0.25, 0.3, with this little hand device. I still have it up in my toolbox. Set your gap, and then, you'd put the plug, tighten it back into a certain amount of, not over-tighten it, tighten it back in. And then the wires, whether you'd use the wires or you'd replace the wires, periodically I'd put out a new set of wires. I mean, those things didn't last also as long as they did today. And then, boom, you're ready to go. And again, such a feeling of a start-finish. You can see the spark plugs you've taken out, and, they're kind of burned down, and hands are dirty and everything, but you turn the ignition and the car fires up, and it's like just such a sense of, again, a start, a Zen-like activity as you're going through, working out the spark plugs, taking your time, setting the gap, getting everything back together. So, sports seasons seemed to have this clear start and clear end when I was growing up. And I think that's gone today. I think even for kids sports, it's year round. So if you're not in the season, you are in the off season. The off season means training and camps and all of these specialized, workouts and stuff like that. And, but back when I played sports, when football season ended, it ended. And then basketball season started. When basketball season ended, then it was baseball. And you didn't have this kind of continuous cycle and camps and training. And so even that's gone today. And I coached basketball back in the 80s. And as I look back on that time, something that was so special about that was that kids weren't rushing over to their cell phones when a game was done or a practice was done or on a bus ride home or something like that. It was talking to one another. It was also being able to reflect and think upon the game, or as you're going to a game, you could immerse yourself much more in the moment and engage in reflection and introspection that you can't do today. And that's just gone. My work in school administration, that's really a swirling tempest. You serve students age 3 through 21, so you can have this pretty long relationship with, the families, especially if you have students with disabilities, complex situations you're working with. And it can be half your career. I mean, it can be, 17, 18 years. And especially when there's friction in those situations, with service delivery, or even like very complicated service delivery where you're always in the mode of having to train people to work with specialists. They might move away. There's high demand. It's hard to get another specialist. It does create, this burnout because, again, there isn't closure in these activities. There isn't closure, and it's hard to get like this tangible of what you have. And I really think going back, and I gave this interview on the Sustainable Living podcast with Marianne West, but that was one of the hardest times in my life, because I was in this constant mode with many people and many situations where it was the race without a finish line, and it was high demand. It was complex. There weren't a lot of tangible things coming out of that. Again, when you're working in more of a human services related field, and people were presenting needs, it becomes very draining, can be very frustrating. You lose perspective. It's hard to gain perspective back because, again, you can't just step out and kind of reset yourself for the system. People might say, well, yeah, you've got summer to do that, like summer break, but not really, because you would have extended school year students would receive services in summer, and there were then all of the state reports due in summer and summer programs. And once you got out of school in June, it took a couple of weeks to wind things down. And really, in a few weeks later, you were starting right up with all of your start of year planning for staff on school safety and type 1 diabetes management and all the curriculum initiatives and training new substitute teachers and so forth. So really, really was a hard time. Glad I've moved beyond that. So when there's an opportunity to stack firewood, I embrace it because it's spiritual, and there's a Zen aspect to it, to stacking wood. It seems like it's a mundane task, but again, there's a clear beginning and a clear end. Let's talk a little bit more about it. So there's some rules. Okay, you can go online and do a search about stacking wood, and you'll come up with the people who say, here's exactly how to stack a pile of wood. 2 pieces this way, 2 pieces this way, do it this way, tape or whatever. Like, well, yeah, you could get into all of that. That's not what we're going to talk about today. So, there are a few things, though. You want to elevate the wood off the floor. So I put down some 2x4s. We're always dry here, but just for circulation of air, get some air going throughout the pile, because the pile will dry a little bit as you get it, depending upon how well it's been cured. But the pile also absorbs the humidity that's in the house, and it gives off the humidity as the house humidity lowers. And periodically give it that wobble test, front, back, side to side, just, a little bit. If it's wobbling too much, take your time with the pile, slow things down, crisscross some of the wood, and just it'll naturally kind of find its stability, find its torus, and everything will be good. So, a cord of wood, for those of you that don't know. So a cord of wood measures 4 feet high by 4 feet wide, 8 feet long, volume of 128 cubic feet. So basically, if you get wood delivered, depending upon the moisture, it can weigh between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds, like that much wood. So I live in a ranch house and have a 2-car garage. We empty the garage out, take the vehicles out, and that's where the firewood gets delivered. Fills up a big part of the garage, like this big mountain of wood. Chaotic kind of commotion all over it, just like it's just put there. And then I take the wood in a wood sack, which is this heavy canvas sack, take it downstairs. So I have to come into the house, then down the stairs, into the furnace room. I identify the rooms in the house by their utility. So like, I don't know what a family room is or a living room. This is my office, and then next to this is the furnace room, and then that's the laundry room. But go into the furnace room, and the furnace room is pretty big. Obviously has the furnace and water heater in it. Also has another whole side where I stack the wood. So that's where it is, in the furnace room and the wood room, I guess. So the house becomes more humid when you're done stacking the wood, because the wood, as it dries, will bring that humidity into that room and throughout the house. So there's this time of maybe 2-3 weeks when the humidity will jump in the house. Nothing that's uncomfortable. It's not like a summer humidity, like a sweltery hot heat, but it's more, you can tell the air is more dense, and it's dense with this smell again of oak and maple. Really great. I mean, it's almost like this calming, this calming fragrance in the air. That wraps around you. The air is a little more dense, a little more thick, but all in a good way, almost like this blanket. And just as you sit on the couch or even in bed, and that is in the air and it's lingering, it's special. It really is. And then when it kind of levels out, you don't notice it anymore, because again, then the wood pile is going to track pretty close to whatever the humidity is in your house. But for a while, initially, it's going to give off a little bit of its moisture to level itself with the humidity, because it's not very humid down here in the basement where the studio is. So yeah, just it's. I will describe it as the 2 to 4 weeks where, I hope I don't have a cold, because just being able to smell that again, the split oak, split maple, maybe some hickory in there, it's just wonderful. So, I used to take all of the firewood and haul it downstairs in a day. So it would be delivered like 7:30 in the morning. They bring multiple trucks, trailers, whatever, to get the cords that, the quantity I ordered. And I would just go to town, and my dad would come down, and he'd be in the basement, and he would stack. So I would haul everything down, dump the wood, and he would stack the piles, which worked well. And I know he enjoyed doing that, and I appreciated it. But what it did is it just kept me going nonstop, bringing wood down. Like I when you stop to stack wood, that's a pause. And then it's a whole different change of what you're doing from just putting wood in the bag and slugging it downstairs. You now have to evaluate your 20 pieces of wood, like from 3 dumps with the bag. And then where are you going to put these? And some pieces you'll be like, I have no idea where this will go because it's like all bulbous on one end and the other end's real skinny. So you got to like figure out in the pile. And it's like a sixth sense. You can just read it. You just know, you can kind of feel as you're going with the wood, and even the pieces that are more dense and lighter. And so, okay, this piece is a little bit bigger. I'm going to set this one off on the side. This is going to start building the corner. So that was something I actually hated the day that wood would be delivered. Now I love wood, and I love our fires we have going tonight. But I would hate the date that the wood would be delivered because it was complete exhaustion for me, literally of just up and down the stairs with these bags of wood. And I forget, I weighed one bag one time and then kind of kept track of the trips I was taking, just the thousands of pounds I was transporting. And the older I got, the greater the toll it took on my body, to literally, like, it would stretch the tendons out and you could feel them move over the bones, and you'd cramp up and your toes would swell and hands would swell. And it's one thing maybe to do that at age 30. It's a different to do it at age 47, where you look and it's like, I'm going to conquer this wood pile and get this thing downstairs. And that was more task completion. So when I came into this year, I was like, I'm not going to do that because I actually do like the stacking. And for my body, it's not a good thing to do that approach anymore. So I spread it out over 2 weekends. So I had the wood delivered on a Saturday, spent about 6 hours that Saturday. Then the next day spent about 5 hours. And then during the week, didn't do anything. And then the next weekend, all inside, put the garage door down. Spent again about another 6 hours, another 5 hours, had everything down. And that way my body felt fine. I wasn't overworking myself. And I had time to put the wood down and do the stacking. So one of the things, going back to when I made these stacks, so it's a lot of wood. So you'll see a picture, like if you go online, if you're looking at the thumbnail for this podcast, or if you're going to watch the video, you're going to be able to see the picture. But my dad actually came up with this way to craft kind of this L-shaped wood pile that would wrap in and kind of add stability to one of the sides. Because one goes up against a poured cement wall, and the other side also goes against a poured cement wall. So right there, I'm in good shape. Nothing to worry about. But then needing to stabilize the rest, and then I kind of did some layering techniques where it goes high and then it gets a little lower and a little lower, just like they kind of did on how farmers will do that on hills. Like they'll do different cuts into the hills, so to prevent erosion, kind of the same way that I create stability with this wood pile. So I have a high efficiency wood burning stove. Put in 2006. I remember the day we looked at all of the stoves and went back, decided which one to pick out. It is black. We have a stone wall, but we had a traditional fireplace when we bought the house. It had been there since the house was built. And then this unit went in, has a lot of glass. You can see the wood. That was important. And very efficient, and has a fan, puts a lot of heat back into the house. Also will heat the stone wall. So if you have the fire going 6, 8, 10 hours or longer, the wall itself, the big stones, heat up. So when the fire goes out, the heat will eventually work its way back out of the stones and into the fireplace room and kind of that side of the house. So it keeps it nice and toasty for a long time. And while it costs money, obviously, for the wood, my heat bills are pretty low. So everything kind of levels out throughout the year. But it's really, that insert is also very simple. It has a little bit of a design. It maybe looks like something like from like the 30s or 40s, although it was 2006. I had to replace the fan one time, but very basic. But it looks like very good. Like if you would have done something more ornate or whatever, it would not have played off of the stones well. This just looks like it was there from day one. Like this was, and the focal point still becomes the stones, and then when you have a fire because of all of the glass in the front of the unit, then the fire, of course, becomes a focal point. So it's really neat. It's neat to have a house like that. Like a lot of people don't have a house with a fireplace and a heavy poured flue, and just it is such an asset. And then you have the smell too of the burning wood, which is so, I would say, therapeutic and relaxing, and the view of the fire, and especially as you turn the lights out. And there's some times I'll sleep out there in winter if I don't have to get up the next day, and it might be during a snowstorm or something like that. And sometimes the whole family, we'll just set up and we'll sleep out there for the fact of it's a little warmer. Not that the rest of the house is cold. I mean, furnace takes care of things, but just to have that warmth from the fireplace. And then when you shut all the lights off and the fire's burning in that orange glow and kind of dancing of the flames, it again is so soothing and so special. I value that so much. And it's funny because my daughters will ask, "Hey, like, when are you building a fire tonight, Dad?" Because even for them, they want to be by it. And I remember when the girls were little, I put this padded thing around the hearth of the fireplace, which is still there today. It was really well made and looks like it should naturally be there and might as well be there. There's no need to kind of take it away, and making sure that they weren't ever close to the fire, because if you got close to this insert, you could get burned. And we've never had a problem with the cats. Actually, we had adopted one cat. It was on New Year's Eve. I think it was 2003. And our other cat, our older cat, our one cat at the time, this cat we adopted was a kitten and jumped up on the hearth. And the older cat immediately went on the hearth and grabbed the kitten behind the neck, like just bit the kitten as a mother cat would kind of do, and lifted the cat off of the hearth and back onto the floor. And that's the only time that kitten ever went up there. So kind of a neat memory. But so where this fireplace is, it's a large room, and it has in back of it, opposite at the fireplace. So if you're standing and not looking at the fireplace, but turned so the fireplace is at your back, you'd be looking across the room at a bank of windows that then about another 120 feet back is parkland, but it kind of narrows. It's not the parkland where the playground equipment is. It's just it narrows down. It's like all brushy and stuff like that, which actually in summer is great because it's a natural barrier. People can't see your property and you can't see other people. It kind of creates like you're in this country area, but you're really in the city. So that's really cool to look out. Then we have two big glass sliding doors off of that room that come right off of that room into a porch, which is like 12 by 12 foot and has this mesh. And that porch was redone when we had the house majorly updated about 10 years ago. So it was all done with a synthetic wood, so nothing would rot. And then this heavy screen, they call it pet screen, so it can't be snagged, and it never has. So when it's warm out, you can open that up, and that's a whole other area which is really relaxing to go out to and hear crickets at night. And but again, so you have so much that you can look out over, and that actually looks down into like an open area that the city has, just like green space. So like kids will be out there in winter sledding down a hill, and in summer they'll be playing, just some ball or some catch down there. So just as a really nice room, nice view. Out our back window there, we have sandhill cranes, which we'll walk through, deer often, fox, and there's a muskrat works his way out through there. Of course, many squirrels. It's really fun. So that's my fireplace room. I've talked about the Zen and also the Zen of the fireplace, but we have our 3 cats, and when you have a fire, they love it. They get close to the fireplace on the floor, and then they just stretch out. Usually they'll flip on their backs, and they'll kind of their fur becomes this kind of radiator where it actually takes in the heat. Like if you put your hand on their belly, it's just like warm because it's bringing in all of the heat. And they would stay there for hours, literally hours, like 5-6 hours. They'll just stay like right there. Like they're content. And again, there is a relaxation into watching that. And when you start that fire, you build the fire, put it in, there is this feeling of the wood in how you're positioning the wood. And I don't use a lot of kindling anymore. I've kind of just got it down where I can do it with newspaper. And as the fire grows, and as you're feeding the fire and changing the fluid, how much air it's getting as it's heating up, and kind of working the fire through the night, and then what the cats are on their backs, we're enjoying the heat, and then as it cools, fire burns out, the heat works its way out of the stones. Just really, again, relaxing. A couple times though, if you start a fire and the air is really dense out, remember I talked about that plane that flies over the Hibbing mine before they do the blast. If the air is very dense, so kind of humid, and then also cold, it will push down on the smoke. So as you start the fire, smoke will start to go up the chimney, but the chimney's cold. So the chimney will condense the smoke because the chimney's not warm, and it'll send the smoke back down, and then it comes back into the fireplace, out the front of the fireplace. Even though fireplace doors are closed, the vents where the heat are radiated out, smoke will come back into the room. Doesn't happen often, but if it does, it's nothing to panic about, because it doesn't mean the house is starting on fire or anything like that. We just open up the sliding door, let the smoke kind of out of the room, and then I just have to get a lot more paper and smaller pieces of wood to get that updraft, because as soon as you can get the wood and leave the door open to the fireplace too, so the updraft, the air is sucking in from the room and coming through the chimney, and you can heat things up pretty fast that way. It happens maybe once or twice a year. So it reminds me of the movie A Christmas Story, where Ralphie's dad, the smoke starts coming upstairs from the fire or the furnace that's acting up, and he goes down and he's finagling with it to get it working again. Well, this is just one of those things, atmospheric, and I don't get upset by it. It doesn't raise my blood pressure. You just know what's going on, and it's going to take about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. It'll resolve. Can air out the house quickly, and what's the worst you're dealing with? Like some really awesome oak and maple, smoke that's worked its way into the house. So I remember I had the chimney cleaned, I think a year or two ago, and the chimney's almost always like just spotless, because we do burn like such good quality hardwood. That's another thing, when you burn, it's kind of the wood that you burn too. The hardwoods give out the most heat, and then they also keep your chimneys the cleanest. So, anyway, back to stacking wood. I said I've done the alternative approach this year, where I've spread it out over the 4 days. It's been much more physically better for me. And then I can relax too as I'm taking the wood down and again, putting those misfit pieces, like where are these going to go? Like this one almost looks like it's got some weird curve to it. Like how is this going to fit into a pile? But it usually does. And there's a trick though. I always leave room on the top of the pile where if there are pieces that just absolutely won't fit anywhere else, then they just go to the top of the pile. And I've got a couple of those I deal with, or I'll set those off to the side, and those will be the first ones that I'll burn out. But it doesn't happen a lot. But to see that pile just develop is so incredible. And it's so rewarding. I take a picture every year when it's done. Take a picture of the wood pile. And I just like to look at it. Like, and when I'm done, I'll go in that room a few times and just like look at it. And yeah, it's a little bit sad as year goes on and the pile gets smaller, as you're burning. And it kind of is this way to tell time of how much wood is left of where you are at, because not a lot is left once you get into March. And the goal is to burn through the wood, because you don't want the wood to stay down there year after year or some unburned, because you can get bugs and stuff like that. But it is so amazing again. And, I was talking about when all of this wood arrives, and initially it seems like it's a daunting task, which it kind of was years ago, but now, and even this time my daughters look at it and they're like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of wood. And it actually does look like a lot more than it is when it's not stacked, when it's just lying there versus when it's all tidy. Although still, like when it's stacked, it's pretty massive. And it's maybe it's just a guy thing. Like, doesn't that wood pile look good? Like, I have a few friends that burn wood and I send them pictures of the wood pile and they like compliment back. Like, it's a lot of wood, or that's well stacked, or yeah, get ready for the season, of wood burning. And then they'll send me a picture too of like, got my wood in the backyard. Here's a picture of it, stacked. Yeah, just an appreciation of that skill. So, over the years too, I mean, I used to buy these things like these fire starters. They come in little cups. They're like the cups you'd get to put ketchup in at a fast food restaurant. So it's kind of that waxy paper, small cupish thing. And what they do is they'll mix in wax and sawdust, and they sell these things as fire starters. And I mean, they typically work. But again, I've moved beyond that. And if I have to like pay for devices to start my fire, I kind of feel like I'm losing. Like, I should be better than that. I should be able to stack it in a certain way, and with newspaper and enough air going in that it just starts, which it does. So when I periodically will clear out the ash, I'll put everything in a bucket, and then go out. We have a big flower garden in back of our house. Remember I talked where that parkland is? It's kind of halfway to where that parkland is. And I will take this ash, which is, again, oak and maple, and I'll pour it into this garden, because there's nothing in the garden, that time of year. Everything's died off, or the perennials are gone. The annuals have been pulled out. And I found that it is kind of like that Mount St. Helens effect. Like, it really provides the nutrients to the garden. The garden grows very well. And, you work it in spring into the soil. But that's always done a nice job. Now, yeah, it's kind of a skill though too, because as you dump this down, you create this plume of ash dust. So if you're too close to it, you're going to just get covered in ash, which is a mess. You don't want that. Or it's on your shoes, then that's hard to get off. So you kind of do this run next to it, and then the bucket is a little in back of you, 5-gallon pail, and then you're pouring it out along the garden until it's all out. I've got it down. So now I have no problem with this. And in winter, when everything's covered with snow, then you just see like this ash pattern on top, which is kind of neat to look at a little bit out the back window. And then, of course, once it snows, it covers it back up. Then there's also this process of cleaning the fireplace and taking the time to take the ash out and wiping down the mirrors. There's special cleaners for that that they make just for fireplace glass. And sometimes some of the glass you just can't get clean. So I use a wet pumice stick and we'll gently go over the inside of the glass. And that seems to take off any stuff that I wasn't able to get through the other processes and get the glass really nice. And it'll stay that way for quite a while, but eventually, the glass kind of darkens up from the wood. But yeah, getting everything cleaned out, doing the little thing with the vac. Got a little hand vac just to make sure anything that gets on the hearth, that gets sucked up. Of course, this is all stuff like a few days after a fire. So nothing is hot, not taking hot coals into a pail or something like that. And then once you get into April, there's always that day where it's like, okay, it's like 65 degrees and the rest of the week is going to be in the 60s. And it's like, this is it. Like, this is the end of the fire burning season. So officially spend an hour or two shutting the fireplace down, getting all of the ash out, kind of making sure with the vacuuming out anything, like with the wet dry vac, and making sure I've got the filter on so don't get dust into the house. Getting the glass all clean and just checking that everything's in good working order. But it is an odd feeling to give it kind of that last turn of the handle and shut it, knowing you're not going to have another fire until probably October. So again, we're talking about this definite cycle of a start, tangible things happening, things that aren't requiring kind of your judgment, just things that happen, things that you want to have happen, things that are bringing comfort to you. And then this closure, this end of season, getting the fireplace ready for next year, or actually ready for next season. And I'll tell you though, while it's a little bit sad, I also love spring. And I know I'm going to be getting my bike out, doing my bike rides. I'll be getting my mower out and working on my yard. So it's a good transition for me to be shutting down the fireplace. But it is, again, one of these things, especially as I get to be 47, as I am 47, you have this primal sense, this connection. And yeah, 47, but how many years do you have where you will go through this? Hopefully quite a few, but I have relatives who in the last year in our extended family been pretty rough, like 5, 6, either between passing away or having to leave their homes to go to assisted living or nursing. So some pretty substantial changes, and you just never know. And realistically, 47? So maybe 30 years of life left. I mean, for a man, it's just kind of the way it is. I mean, so it seems like a lot of time, but it's not. So it's this appreciation of the time that you have and the Zen of stacking firewood and the Zen of building a fire and the Zen of shutting your fireplace down at the end of the year, getting the ash out, getting the glass cleaned, getting the hearth all cleaned, and wow. So find those defining beginning and ending activities in your life. And they're probably not going to have to do with anything that involves people. They're going to be tangible, physical activities. When I say physical, I think there can definitely be the Zen component of writing, like I wrote a book, that you do that, but and the book, I guess, would be the outcome, or if you're helping people or running a marathon, or I don't know what was maybe some of these things. But like I remember canoeing with my dad many summers and enjoyed that. But I'm saying there is something different, like with the stacking of a wood type project, where you're starting out, you're seeing it, and you're engaging it, and you have to, and you're problem solving as you're going through this, and it's quiet. Like I don't have a radio on or anything of what pieces go where, and they all, you just kind of, this spatial ability. It's that you can look at the pile and just know that this one piece needs to go over here, but then these other three pieces, but it can't be like that finicky because it would take you forever to stack this. It's just this natural feel of where these pieces go as you pick them up, and their weight and their layout and their design, how they've been split. So aim for something where you're moving your body, aim for something that's tangible at the end. Again, I mean, you could argue taking a walk is a Zen activity. Biking, I think, is a Zen activity, probably more so for me because I can definitely feel the change in my body big time as I start a large, undertake biking. Get the bike ready in the morning, do all of the setting the pressures on the tires and packing everything and hydrating myself and doing the ride and enjoying and being in touch in the ride and coming home. But there's also this thing of, walking and biking. I mean, it builds your endurance, your muscle. It's this long-term, maybe kind of Zen, much longer scale. Like that one winter, I think I walked like every night, that was like 3-4 months of this long Zen process versus this fireplace, what I'm talking about there and stacking of the firewood, of the Zen process. It's much more condensed. And I think again, for me, it is so different than what I work with every day. And maybe too, I'm at this part in life where I met with the retirement people in the state, and I met with the Social Security people, and I met with all of the people in a meeting again with one of my financial advisors, CPA, tax person on Friday. And it's happening, like we will be retired very soon. And that's brought about an excitement and also a different feeling. I mean, because it's a closure, and I will be glad to be moving out of the things that seem not to have a finish line. But I want to make sure that, what I bring into my life are either the short-term Zen activities or these longer-term Zen activities, more of the biking or more of making sure that walking at night and things like that. So if you don't have a fireplace, folks, a wood fireplace, take the opportunity. If you go on vacation somewhere and it's like, hey, we have a wood fireplace, rent that room. Give it a try. Now, I'm sure there's something about being around a fire pit and things like that too, but something about wood and fireplace and this whole process, again, the Zen of stacking. But there's so many things you can do in life, whether it be gardening, whether it be, learning some skills, repairing some of your own things around the house, that the Zen component, this defined start, this hands-on activity, this completion that's tangible, that then does not continue. It ends, has an end point. It's the vehicle that rolls off the assembly line. You're done building it, done. So I think we need more of that, and to bring more of that into our lives, because we tend to saturate ourselves with these never-ending things. And not only never-ending, but also accelerating. And it's not good. It's cumulative. It brings stress. It brings anxiety. It's just not healthy for us. It's completely fine. It's very healthy to stack some oak, to stack maple. So I almost wish you could be there. And I wouldn't turn down the help, most likely, either. So, all right, everybody. Stay safe.
This has been the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio show host, and leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Remember to check back each week for the latest, best, and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. You can find Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.